Welcome in. It is really great to have you sitting down with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We spend a lot of time looking at the surface of things, the headlines, the major policy announcements, that kind of stuff.
The loud stuff.
Right, exactly. But today, our mission is to take a deep dive into the underlying machinery of the United States government itself. We're looking at the ultimate playbook of political power.
And it is quite a playbook.
Our single source for today's deep dive is a comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing the standing rules of the United States Senate. And look, I know parliamentary procedure sounds like it might be a cure for insomnia.
It really does.
But stick with us here. This document is filled with loopholes, invisible pause buttons, and bizarre traditions that dictate every single action taken in the Senate.
To really understand how this playbook operates, we have to look at the foundation of the system.
Right.
Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution states, quite simply, that each House may determine the rules of its proceedings.
Meaning they made it up.
Exactly. The framers essentially handed the Senate a blank slate and told them to figure out how they wanted to run themselves. Over the centuries, they've built this highly complex, deeply entrenched system.
Currently, there are 44 rules in total governing the body. The most recent major revision to the entire rulebook happened in January of 2013, but the newest individual rule was Rule 44, added back in 2006.
Introduced by the Legislative Transparency and Accountability Act.
Right. And that specific rule deals with earmarks, which are those highly specific legislative provisions that direct funds to particular projects in a senator's home state.
Which is interesting because adding a rule specifically for earmarks highlights how these rules evolved to address the political realities of the time.
Yeah.
These 44 rules aren't just administrative red tape. They are tactical tools. Every procedural quirk can be weaponized if you know how to read the manual.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with one of the best examples of a tactical tool, the quorum.
Oh, this is a great one.
Since the Constitution requires a majority to be present to actually do business, you might assume attendance is strictly monitored, right?
You would think so.
But instead, the Senate operates on this polite fiction. Under their rules and customs, a quorum is simply assumed to be present at all times. They operate as if everyone is in the room unless a senator explicitly calls their bluff.
And that maneuver is called suggesting the absence of a quorum. Any senator can trigger this just by standing up and making the request.
And then what happens?
At that point, the clerk is required to literally call the roll of the Senate and note which members are present. But, and this is the key, it's rarely done to actually check attendance.
It's a delay tactic.
It is effectively a strategic pause button. Think about it. If you're in an incredibly stressful, high-stakes meeting at your job where tempers are flaring and you need to hammer out a compromise.
You're usually just stuck at the conference table.
Right. But imagine if you could press a button and force the meeting to pause while someone slowly reads the name of every single person in the company.
That buys you vital time.
Exactly. In the Senate, it allows leaders to step off the floor, negotiate in the cloakrooms, or it gives a senator time to physically travel from their office to the chamber.
And once they buy that time, how do they restart?
That's the beauty of it. Once the delay is no longer needed, any senator can ask for unanimous consent to rescind the quorum call. Assuming no one objects, the clerk stops reading names, the pause button is released, and action resumes exactly where it left off.
It's a brilliant piece of spatial manipulation. It controls who needs to be in the room and when.
Absolutely.
But once the room is actually engaged, the rules governing how they speak are just as heavily layered. The floor is presided over by the presiding officer.
Usually the vice president.
Right, acting as the president of the Senate. When the VP isn't there, it falls to the president pro tempore, which basically means for the time being. Customarily, that goes to the longest-serving member of the majority party.
And in very specific cases, like a presidential impeachment, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court takes the chair.
Regardless of who is sitting in that chair, a senator can only speak if called upon by them. But the presiding officer has very little discretionary control, right?
Almost none. The rules require them to recognize the first senator who rises to speak. It's essentially a formal game of who stands up fastest.
Though custom does dictate that the majority and minority leaders get priority if they stand up.
Right, even if someone else jumps up first.
The language they use, once recognized, is strictly regulated too. Senators have to address all speeches directly to the presiding officer, Mr. President or Madam President. They are forbidden from directly addressing their colleagues.
Which feels so counterintuitive for a debate.
Exactly. If they want to reference a peer, they have to use the third person, the senior senator from Virginia or the junior senator from California.
It forces a layer of professional distance onto everything. It keeps things deliberately formal.
But while the manner of speaking is formal, the actual content of the speeches is totally unrestricted. There's no requirement that a speech be germane to the matter at hand.
And germaneness just means being strictly relevant to the topic.
Right. A senator could stand up during a debate on complex tax policy and talk about a local sports team, and they are completely within their rights.
Which ties perfectly into how the Senate bends time to dictate power. Because the Senate doesn't operate on standard calendar days. They operate on legislative days.
Meaning a day begins when they convene and only ends when they officially adjourn?
Right. A single legislative day could span a calendar week or even a month. And this matters because a senator is limited to making no more than 2 speeches on a motion per legislative day.
That sounds strict until you factor in 2 details. 1, that day might last for weeks. And 2, those 2 speeches have absolutely no time limit unless restricted by unanimous consent or statute.
None at all. A senator can hold the floor for as long as they are physically capable of standing and talking.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to the most notorious consequence of the rule book, the filibuster.
The ultimate tool of obstruction.
Exactly. It's designed to defeat bills simply by prolonging the debate indefinitely. The source provides a staggering historical benchmark. The longest individual filibuster was by Senator Strom Thurmond.
Over 24 hours, right.
Over 24 hours straight, attempting to block the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1957. It's the second longest continuous speech in Senate history.
What's fascinating here is that the endurance test is the cinematic version everyone pictures. But a filibuster does not actually require a marathon speech.
Really?
No, because the primary goal is simply to delay the final vote. A filibuster frequently takes the form of an endless series of dilatory motions.
Just maneuvers meant to waste time?
Right. Demand a roll call vote on a minor motion to adjourn. That takes 15 minutes. Then propose a spelling change to the bill. Another roll call. They throw sand in the gears to grind the process to a halt without ever having to speak for 24 hours.
And they get so creative with it. There's this wild anecdote from 1922 with Senator Pat Harrison. He was filibustering the Dyer anti-lynching bill and found a loophole with the Senate Journal.
The official record of the previous day's minutes.
Right. The rules say the reading of the journal can't be suspended without unanimous consent. Harrison weaponized the minutes. He refused to grant consent and just endlessly discussed the journal.
And because it was within the rules, he couldn't be stopped.
Day after day until the bill's sponsors gave up and withdrew the legislation.
To break that kind of blockade, you need cloture. That's the mechanism to force an end to debate.
And that's not easy to get.
Not at all. Since 1975, invoking cloture requires a 3/5 supermajority of the entire Senate. That's 60 votes.
And as the source notes, there have only been 3 filibuster-proof majorities since 1975, so you almost always need the other party to help shut down the debate.
But even if you get the 60 votes, the debate doesn't end immediately. The rules say once cloture is invoked, they still get up to 30 additional hours of debate.
The emergency stop button still takes 30 hours to slow the train down.
Exactly.
Now, the floor is where the drama happens, but the real granular work happens in the committees, the little legislatures.
Right. 16 standing committees, 4 select, 4 joint.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah, their gatekeeping authority is massive.
they handle specific jurisdictions like foreign relations or armed services. When a bill is introduced, it goes to the committee first, and they hold all the cards.
They really do. They can hold public hearings, conduct line-by-line markups, or consolidate multiple bills into one clean bill.
Or they can just ignore it entirely.
Which is how most legislation dies, placed in a drawer and ignored. If a committee ignores a bill, it effectively has no path forward.
And the seating on these committees is a strict mathematical translation.
Yeah.
If your party controls 55% of the Senate, you get roughly 55% of the seats on the Foreign Relations Committee.
Usually all this committee work and floor debate is public record. But there's a dramatic exception in the rules to closed session.
This is wild. Imagine the heavy chamber doors locking. The public gallery is completely cleared out. Everyone not sworn to secrecy is kicked out, and the Senate goes completely dark.
It sounds like a movie, but it's real procedure. Any single senator can trigger a closed session if just one other senator seconds the motion. Two people can clear the room.
And they use it for sensitive subjects, right?
Yeah, national security intelligence, private presidential communications, or impeachment deliberations.
Once they finally finish debating, whether in secret or public, they have to vote. Usually it's a simple voice vote, aye or no. The presiding officer just judges the volume.
But any senator can demand a recorded vote if 1/5 of the members second the request.
Which they usually do out of professional courtesy.
Right. The clerk calls the roll alphabetically. And the rules say this vote must stay open for at least 15 minutes.
Again, giving senators time to run from their offices to the floor.
And if there's a tie, the vice president breaks it. But if the VP isn't there, a tie is an automatic negative. The motion fails.
So what does this all mean? Getting a bill through committee, surviving the floor, overcoming a 60-vote cloture threshold, passing anything is a monumental climb.
The system is built to prevent rapid change.
But there's a massive exception to bypass the filibuster.
Reconciliation.
Right. Created by the Congressional Budget Act of 1974.
Because Congress felt they were losing control of the budget process. Reconciliation is a fast-track engine, and its superpower is that it completely prohibits filibusters.
Debate is strictly capped at exactly 20 hours.
Once those 20 hours are up, a simple majority is all you need, 51 votes. But because it's so powerful, the guardrails are incredibly tight. It only applies to spending, revenues, and the debt limit.
Strictly financial.
Yes.
Yes.
And they can technically pass up to 3 a year, one for each of those categories, but if they combine them, they forfeit the others. So practically, it's usually just one reconciliation bill a year.
And then in 1985, they added the Byrd Rule, named after Senator Robert Byrd.
Crucial addition. It allows any senator to block provisions that are extraneous to the budget. You can't sneak a major, unrelated policy change into a budget bill just to dodge the filibuster.
Plus, it can't be used for discretionary spending or to alter Social Security.
Right.
But it's not just legislation that gets delayed. It's people, too. The president's nominees, governed by Rule XE.
The advice and consent power. Nominees go to committee first, just like bills. The committee can hold hearings, make recommendations, or fail to act.
Surprisingly, the source points out that historically, about half of civilian appointees are approved without even having a hearing. They just review the file and approve it.
But if Senate leadership opposes a nominee, they can delay scheduling the final vote indefinitely.
Which leads to an incredible loophole. Rule XXI says if the Senate goes into recess for more than 30 days, unapproved nominations are officially returned to the president.
Like an expiration date on the paperwork.
Exactly. The president would have to start all over again. So how does the Senate avoid that?
They use a procedural trick. They simply refuse to go into a recess longer than 30 days. Instead, they hold pro forma sessions.
I love this part. Every few days during a break, one designated senator walks into an empty chamber, gavels the Senate into session, and seconds later, gavels it out.
It resets the 30-day clock, the recess is technically interrupted, and all the pending nominations stay active. They are technically at work, so the paperwork doesn't expire.
It's amazing. Every procedure we've talked about, the quorum call, cloture, reconciliation, pro forma sessions, it's never just procedure. It is strategy.
Completely calculated strategy.
And the next time you hear these terms on the news, you'll know exactly what kind of invisible levers are being pulled behind the scenes.
It does leave us with a lingering thought, though. Since Article 1, Section 5 gives the Senate the sole power to determine its own rules, these 44 rules aren't actually permanent laws.
Right.
They are just agreements, polite agreements holding the system together. What would happen to the stability of the entire American legislative system if a temporary majority simply decided to wipe the slate clean and rewrite all 44 rules overnight? The Senate would transform from a slow, deliberative body into an absolute winner-takes-all battlefield.
That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying thing to ponder, and definitely something to keep an eye on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a new lens for the next time you see the political machinery turning. Keep questioning how the world around you actually works. We'll catch you on the next one.